Good morning and afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are joining us for this session. Welcome to the session, Islamic Capital for Impact, Pathway to Exceeding the SDGs in Asia. My name is Oti. I am AVPN Southeast Asia Director, and I am delighted to have you join us today. I'm very glad to see many familiar names among the participants who have also joined multiple sessions during the conference week already. I hope you all have been enjoying your virtual conference experience with us. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, a very warm welcome and a very brief introduction of who we are and what we do. AVPN is a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. Our mandate is to move more capital towards impact in Asia by providing social investors like yourself opportunities to connect, learn, and lead. We will be sharing highlights of our day live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. So don't forget to share your experience with us by using the hashtag AVPN2020. Together with our team, I will be ensuring that your learning experience with us this afternoon is a meaningful one. So before we start with the panel conversation, I would like to highlight a few features in this room to keep our conversations lively. If you're finding that a speaker's webcam video is facing a lag, please pause the video by hovering over the face and clicking on the pause button to reduce your internet bandwidth. If you are facing any other technical challenges, please do not hesitate to reach out to us through the Q&A pod. We will strive to address your query as soon as we can. Please note that this session will be recorded, and you will be able to access the recording from conference.avpn.asia tomorrow. We encourage active participation from all of you, and you may type any questions and comments you have to the speakers in the Q&A pod, and we will convey these questions to our speakers continuously during the whole session. Due to time constraints, the speakers may not be able to respond to all of your questions today, but if this is the case, we will share the questions and comments with them after the session for their consideration. If you are joining the session in Zoom, you can equally post your questions and comments in the Zoom Q&A chat, and we will share them live in Adobe Connect to the speakers. We will be running a few polls to get your insights during the session. You will see the first poll already visible on the screen, so please feel free to share your response now. We are really interested in understanding your level of knowledge on the topic of Islamic Capital for Impact as a starting and guiding point for our expert speakers. If you take a look at the bottom of the screen, we have also provided you with reading materials and a video that you can download or refer to. We hope you will utilize these materials, which were shared by the speakers, to complement your learning experience. This will be visible for you as soon as we start with the speaker's view. Please make full use of the AVPN connector to continue chatting with your speakers and fellow delegates during the whole conference week. You'll find the link in the resource section, bottom left. A quick 1-minute tutorial can also be found on the main conference site to make full use of your networking opportunities. Now, it's time to get started with the conversation with the esteemed panelists. And I'm very pleased to introduce you to your session moderator, Mr. Imran Mufti, who is a partner in Hogan Lovells finance practice. He has practiced in the Middle East for over 18 years, focusing primarily on the areas of Islamic finance and capital markets. Imran, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Uchi, for that kind introduction. I'm very much looking forward to this session. We have an esteemed panel of speakers. I'll let them to do their own more detailed introductions, but just a few words of overview in relation to this particular topic. Islamic capital for impact. I mean, Islamic capital itself is there to provide opportunities for the development of good endeavours, and the SDGs, the global goals set out by the UN, are very much in line with the objectives and the ethos of Islamic finance. So it's refreshing actually to have a session dedicated to that particular principal objective of Islamic finance. By way of brief introduction, my name is Imran Mufti. I'm a partner at Hogan Lovells, which is an international law firm with over 45 offices globally. I specialize in capital markets and Islamic structured products in particular, and have worked on a number of projects in very diverse areas of the world, from West Africa to the Far East, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, and the United States. So without further ado, I think we'll start and give a brief introduction to each of the speakers. The first speaker we have is Mr. Khalid Khalifa, who is a highly experienced professional humanitarian who has over 20 years of experience in this field. He currently now sits in the esteemed position of regional representative of the United Nations for the High Commission for Refugees, and in particular represents the GCC states on that body. We then have Dr. Salim Mubarak Bazaid, who is the CEO of NAMA Foundation. NAMA acts in an effort to promote sustainable development, and it collaborates with governments and partners and implementing agencies to benefit the education and other philanthropic sectors. And finally, we have Mr. Fadl Imansia, who is a Sharia director based out of Jakarta, and is part of the PTP Principal Asset Management. He's worked in a number of fields. Again, he can describe what he's done himself much better than I can, and is best placed to advise in particular around the structures that are adopted. Just a reminder about his poll. We do have a poll running which will give an indication of the level of interest and knowledge that the community has in relation to Islamic finance and its objectives. I noticed that the first one related to understanding of Islamic products, and there was a significant number of the participants that said that they didn't have or they had no understanding of Islamic finance products. I know that we've sent an introduction to Islamic finance, an overview of the basics and the structures that are adopted for Islamic finance, transactions and endeavours. So please feel free to ask the organisers at AVPN to forward that on to you. So without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker, Mr. Khalid Khalifa from the UNHCR.
It is a pleasure to be with all of you and to share the same panel with my esteemed colleagues. As Imran mentioned, my name is Khalid Khalifa. I work for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. My experience in that field goes back to '95, and I worked for a set of different types of organizations, including NGOs, international donors, and the UN. So I hope that my intervention today will cover different perspectives of that system. When we speak about Islamic finance, I think we should start by differentiating between Islamic finance and Islamic philanthropy. Islamic finance per se, for those of us who do not have enough knowledge about this area, is a set of complicated tools actually that are intended for economic transactions in the market. They are intended for investment. They include Islamic banking. They include a different set of tools and apparatuses that are intended to enrich the economy. However, some of those lend themselves easily to social impact and social philanthropy. And we can boil those down to 4 tools, mainly zakat, sadaqat, sukuk, and awqaf. And hopefully we will cover some of those or all of them during our interventions today. For us in UNHCR, we focused on the main tool, which is zakat, the Islamic way of giving on an annual basis. As you know, Muslims around the world are asked by divine regulation, are asked by God to donate 2.5% of their unused savings. So not everything that a Muslim has, because there is also usually a misconception about that. We are not talking about 2.5 of the general GDP of Muslim countries, for example. No, we are talking about 2.5 of unused savings that a Muslim person has. This religious obligation applies to every Muslim, including children. Usually, when we speak about religious practices, we say that only adults are asked to perform, are asked to abide by regulations. But if a child owns enough savings and there is an adult who is taking care of the money of that child, in Islam also this money is eligible for 2.5% zakat every year. When we speak about zakat and Islamic philanthropy, we have to put that in context. The world now has more than 70 million people who are forcibly displaced. 70 million people around the world. This is not evenly distributed around the world. The Islamic world accounts for 60% of this total. So it is natural and a no-brainer that we speak about Islamic philanthropy in the context of UNHCR, since the bulk of the caseload is actually in the Muslim world. For us, we, as you see on the slide, we decided to focus on 3 areas in the application of zakat. We wanted our program to be trusted. We wanted it to be compliant with Islamic regulations and Sharia, and we wanted it to be effective. When it comes to trustworthiness, we are an organization that is more than 70 years old. We have more than 400 offices around the world in 130 countries, and we have 10,000 staff members. We claim that we have enough access to the most difficult places around the world, and our programs are tried and tested. We wanted our program to be compliant with Sharia, so we sought the fatwas and opinions of scholars around the world. We gathered a good number of fatwas from different countries to make sure that the program is Sharia compliant, and this required some infrastructure from our side. Some of the decisions that we needed to take were not easy in the context of the UN system, but we did them to make sure that we reach the right beneficiaries. We waived all the overhead costs related to zakat programs. We opened dedicated bank accounts for zakat that are interest-free, which is another requirement by Sharia. And we abided by the categories that should receive zakat money. As you might know, in Islam there are only 8 categories who are allowed to receive zakat, including the poor, the ultra-poor, and the displaced. And those, all of them, apply to refugees and displaced people, and also indebted people, people who are in debt. So we consider refugees and displaced people as fully eligible and compliant with the Sharia perspective when it comes to zakat. We hope that our program has proven its effectiveness. I don't think it can get more effective than that for a donor or an organization that wants to pay zakat, that somebody else will take your contribution, deliver it in the most difficult places around the world, including Yemen, including Bangladesh, and Somalia, and Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and not only do that, but do it for free. So we actually subsidize the disbursement of zakat. Last year, and this is the second slide that you see in front of you, we reached more than 1 million people around the world, mainly in Yemen and in Bangladesh, but also in other countries, especially the Syria context. And this year, we are hoping to double this figure. We received about $43 million last year in contributions from zakat donors, and this year we have already exceeded that. When it comes to development, I don't know, Imran, how if I have reached my 5 minutes, or I have 1 more minute to cover the relation between zakat and the SDGs. Very quickly, and I hope we can come back to this point later on. I think zakat per se has a lot of potential to address poverty issues around the world. The amount of zakat circulating in the Muslim world has been estimated by the Islamic Development Bank and by many other scholars in the range between $300 billion per year and $1 trillion per year. There is no agreement about the exact figure, but even if we take the lowest, we are talking about $300 billion around the world. So I think if zakat is applied and is institutionalized correctly, we should not be talking about poverty in the Muslim world. Poverty should not be an issue in the Muslim world. And also, slow economies can be revived by paying zakat. We have experimented in a number of countries, including in Lebanon. Every dollar we paid in cash in Lebanon resulted in $2.1 increase in the local GDPs in those areas, and without affecting the inflation. So zakat is also a tool that can mobilize local economies by injecting money in the pockets of the poor and making sure that the economy is moving forward and is not really stagnating to the point of standstill, especially in times that are very challenging, like what we live in here. So I think Islamic philanthropy and the Islamic finance offer great options and a nice way to address economic and poverty issues worldwide. And I will stop here. Thank you very much. Back to you, Imran.
Very much, Mr. Khalid, for your insightful presentation, fascinating figures, and I'm sure a lot of us have really benefited from your presentation today. We'll follow up with some questions a little bit later on. Before that, if we could please move over to Dr. Saleh Mubarak, who's the CEO of the Nana Foundation. Dr. Saleh, please take it away.
Thank you, Imran. Thank you, Khalid. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm very pleased to be with you guys for the second time in ABBN, but it happened to be virtual this time. Alhamdulillah. The foundation actually is based in Malaysia, but we work globally, and I work for NAMA as the CEO of the foundation. We do work in 3 countries mainly for the time being, which are Indonesia, Tanzania, as well as Kyrgyzstan, which is actually in a way or another 3 continents. I mean, different time zones, different cultures, backgrounds, all together. And the foundation focusing only on 2 areas, that is, do our activities, which are education empowerment, as well as socio-economic empowerment, specifically targeting empowering the youth and the local NGOs in the countries where we operate. As far as Islamic capital for impact is concerned, and I believe this is very, very relevant and interesting topic indeed, that is, important for all NGOs as well as all stakeholders working in philanthropy from across sectors. And Islamic capital actually enjoys large portion of the liquidity around the globe, either with the third sector, private sector, or even with the governments, in the same time. So it is very important to ensure this capital is inclusive with the international, financial system, and enjoys, a large level, good level of interactions as well as cooperations to ensure it benefits better the beneficiaries. And for us, from our point of view, to ensure Islamic capital is really active and valid and beneficial globally, and contribute significantly to the SDGs in Asia and elsewhere as well. I believe there are few things that we need to consider in order for us to enhance the benefit and maximize the impact of the Islamic capital worldwide. One of them, which we should look at the beginning, is the Sharia compliance as well as products. And this is, I think, the core value of the Islamic capital, which has to be Sharia compliance. Most of the financial solutions and instruments around us, the majority are non-Islamic yet. So Islamic Sharia compliance, financials as well as products are, yet to grow and expand to ensure that there is, a required, at least level of cooperation and partnership and contributions that equal to the volume of the financial liquidity available under this category. As Brother Mr. Khalid has mentioned, the zakat alone is from 300 billion to almost 1 trillion. There are other studies talks about $500 billion annually that is only generated from zakat. So these amounts actually are really huge if put into more and multiple effective and unique products which are Sharia compliant. I think it will have more outreach as well as more impact. As far as we know, there are only limited Sharia compliant products when it comes to the Islamic capital and Islamic finance. We talk about Murabaha, Mudaraba. This is especially only for the loans and Qardu Hasan and similar products. But I believe there's a potential for more products to come under this category. The second point is the cross-sectors cooperation. Islamic capital cannot work alone. As we live in a very inclusive, complicated, well-connected world in terms of the banking systems, financial transactions, country-to-country relations, international transfers. So we should find a way to ensure there is a level of cooperation as well as coordination between the faith-based capitals, not only for Islamic, even non-Islamic faith-based capitals, as well as non-faith-based capitals, whether it comes from the private sector or comes from the public sector. So I believe having a triangle of cooperation between the three sectors is very, very important to ensure the success and the expansion of the Islamic capital. to achieve the SDGs in Asia and elsewhere, as well as to sort out the deeply rooted issues in the societies. We talk about 70 million displaced and refugees, but there are also hundreds of millions which not displaced, but they are poor in their own countries, require better education, better healthcare system, and etc., which I believe will be better addressed if we do have more cooperation among the sectors. Third point is the policy making efforts. As you know, when it comes to products, when it comes to instruments, when it comes to interventions, especially at this high level, it requires a certain number of laws, some kind of regulations. Some are regional, some local, some even international. So this is also another point. Sometimes people look at the practical aspect of the cooperation, but they forget about the theoretical and the policy aspect of the cooperation. So in order for us to have a better and fruitful cooperation and impactful Islamic capital inclusion, we have to have a solid foundation and a matrix actually of laws and regulations at national as well as international levels that serve and support such kind of practices. Fourth point is relief with sustainability. Most of the Muslim products and the zakat fund specifically that is spent, the majority of it goes for relief activities, which only for one time, and people have the ambition that zakat money has to be spent within the same year of the donation. So I believe we need to have a revolutionary and innovative thinking how we can transform and migrate from the relief practices to more sustainable solutions using the zakat and the Islamic capital. So fifth point is about the zakat itself. I think zakat is something that's very unique value and very unique principle. In Islam, even though it was put as one of the 5 pillars of Islam. So it is something that all Muslims is really concerned about and cherish. So how we can transform the zakat from short-term interventions to more long-term interventions. Then for the just please I just only to conclude how we also can move from impact from giving to impact. Yes, we can still using the Islamic capital and the Islamic philanthropy to still donate and still provide funds, but not necessarily as giving the fund, but how we can improve our practices to ensure that all these donations giving from the Muslim from the Islam point of view, from just only merely giving donations to more impactful donations, and that requires enhancing the qualities either of the manpower working within these Muslim NGOs, having better policies, more products that also support this. Last but not least, which is about social return and monetary return. Mainly for public and private sector, people look at monetary and financial return. But from the soul, at least the Islamic philanthropy point of view, people look at social return instead of merely financial return. And I believe having cooperation among the 3 sectors, the private as well as the third sector, let's say the Islamic and the conventional, there are always ways whereby we can still achieve social return as well as financial return. Thank you. Back to you, Imran.
Salih, thank you very much for that. An excellent presentation, in particular again on zakat and its many facets. If we could move quickly now on to Mr. Fadl Imran Shah, who is the Sharia Director at PT Principle. And if I could just make mention of the community chat. If anybody has any questions, please do feel free to post them in the community chat. and we can take them up when we have the plenary session a bit later on. Thank you very much, Mr. Fadlul, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Imran. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me introduce myself to you all. My name is Fadlul Imansyah. I'm a Shariah Director of PT Principal Asset Management Indonesia. Our company is basically an investment management company who is based in Indonesia, and our office is mainly in Jakarta. So I'm currently overseeing the Sharia investment business, as well as from the commercial and also for the social or Islamic philanthropy in Indonesia. Before I move to my presentation, I think just to give you a glimpse that Indonesia is currently has the GDP of about $1 trillion. If we compile within the 80% of the total population from Indonesia, which is Muslim, it will be, and then if we take out the 2.5% of zakat, the potential numbers of Islamic philanthropy in Indonesia on zakat itself is about $200 million. So from that, I think that is one of the reasons why we are aiming for developing our business into the Islamic philanthropy. So for the time being, we are currently on the process of developing our Islamic philanthropy fund, which is basically, this is a fixed income fund, which is regulated by the SEC of Indonesia. And our contribution to the market is basically to have to give the investor the opportunity to invest and also involve on Islamic philanthropy at the same time by investing on the principal Islamic philanthropy itself. Basically, the asset allocation for the Islamic philanthropy that we have will be donated to the investor about 100% of the capital and the investment return to the appointed organization, which is in Indonesia. We have at least two big Islamic philanthropy institutions like Basnas and also Dompet Duafa, and maybe we can also name like ACT. That is basically the one as we call as a Nazir, which will be managing the project or that related to Islamic philanthropy. If we look at the asset allocation for our fund, the minimum investment goes to Indonesia government bonds, Sukuk, and also the Sharia fixed income instrument in Indonesia, of course with the investment grade ratings. So if you look at the scheme that we have on our Islamic philanthropy fund, is basically we have three schemes. First is the regular, and then secondly is silver, and thirdly is gold. So what is differentiate between these three type of scheme is basically, if you look at the regular, it's basically there is no different with the other investment product that is selling into the market. But on the philanthropy itself, we will separately manage to have contribute some of our management fee into the philanthropy beneficiary. On the silver scheme, the investor will any investment return that coming from this Islamic philanthropy fund will be donated to the beneficiary that we have. For instance, like the one that I mentioned before, some of the Nazir that will manage the Islamic philanthropy goes to the public. And the gold scheme is basically if the investor may have more money to consume. I mean, instead of they're doing the regular zakat, they can do some of this kind of a gold scheme into the fund, which is basically donating 100% of the principal, both the principal and also to the investment return of their fund. So If you look at the scheme that we have currently on the slide, is basically it's saying that we will donate at least two type kind of investment. I mean, the investment return and also the capital. Although the capital will be remains on our fund, which is become some kind of like a revolving fund that will be managing, and also for the expectation of the investment return that will be donating to the beneficiary that we have. So actually, this kind of Islamic philanthropy that we have is also have already running from the government side. If you notice that Indonesia, with the collaboration of Badan Wakaf Indonesia, currently has already launched what we call it as a cash wakaf link sukuk, which is basically if someone invests into this cash wakaf link sukuk, the investment return will be distributed into the donation of for the current project is eye hospital, if I'm not mistaken. So any investment return that coming to this cash wakaf link sukuk will be donating in order for the community to develop this particular hospital. So and also on the investment side, if we are talking about Islamic finance, currently the project that the government institution have on the cash wakaf link sukuk is basically as the same as what we have in an asset allocation, which is basically investing on the government sukuk, which is issued by the government. And I think the reason why is basically is because it issued by the government, which have a sovereign kind of risk, and I think that will be more safe to the investor going forward, so that they will not have any issue on the volatility of the investment itself, and as well as the investment return. I think that will end my presentation for today. I will be very happy if there's any question or feedback coming from the audience going forward. Over to you, Imran. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fadlul. There was a very insightful presentation. We're going to now move on to the plenary session. So we have questions and answers, and I'm glad to see that a number of you have posted questions in the community chat box. So I'll put those questions to them and solicit their views on the respective topics. The first one relates to the ability of Islamic financial instruments to combine with conventional financial instruments. And this is something I actually with a view to be involving conventional funds and financial instruments. What experience do you have of that, and is there an easier way of perhaps combining the two? So if we ask Mr. Khalid to kick off with that one, please.
Sorry, Imran, can you repeat the question very quickly?
Sure. The question is, to what extent or what are the mechanisms for being able to combine conventional finance with for example, the 4 products that you mentioned in your presentation? How can we encompass conventional finance in the Islamic finance space and try and achieve, because a lot of these are humanitarian objectives, so it's not exclusively Islamic that these particular endeavors are based on. So it's something. If you'd like to comment,
clear. Yeah, clear. Thank you very much. think I should start by saying that the only difference between Islamic finance and non-Islamic finance is the Sharia compliance element. Islamic finance is actually conventional finance, but done according to the principles of Sharia. For example, not accepting interest, not using projects that generate funds from an Islamic perspective in an activity that is not approved by Islam. For example, you cannot start a project from an Islamic perspective to start a winery or to build an alcohol factory, because this is not accepted in Islam. However, the two should go hand in hand, as Dr. Saleh mentioned in his intervention, that you cannot apply the Islamic finance principles in a vacuum. You need to put this in the context of the conventional financial system, in the legal framework, and to make sure of the complementarity between both. And I would like, if time allows at the end, to touch upon the misconceptions related to Sharia, related to anything that has Islam in it. I think there is a lot of misconceptions about anything that is Islamic, especially since the time of 9/11 until now. So I hope I answered the question.
Thank you, Mr. Khalid. Mr. Fadl, do you have any observations around the same topic?
Yeah, I think what really differentiates between the Islamic finance and the conventional one is basically from the investment point of view is on the underlying asset itself. I mean, whether the underlying asset of the investment the investing fund will be Sharia compliant or not. So it's basically, if we are talking about the underlying instrument itself, it has to be coming from the platform of the most of the scholars on what kind of contract that the fund, I mean the project that has on itself.
Dr. Saleh, a question for you in relation to the determination or identification of beneficiaries. When you looked to your various investments, particular in relation to zakat, are the investors looking for a financial return when they invest in these bonds? Well, I think you're on mute, so if you could unmute yourself.
Okay, now it's fine. If I could please just touch a little bit on the point that raised in the previous questions. I believe there are always, ways of collaborations, between the Islamic capital as well as the conventional. If there is, as Brother Khalid has mentioned, there's a platform, legal platform that that accommodate both sectors, concerns or requirements. And one of the way that could people start with of having, let's say, joint portfolios. To having the portfolios that that different parties can inject some fund into it, and to consider every party requirement. And if we look at the financial practices now, specifically within the banking system, we find that the same bank actually has the conventional banking as well as the Islamic banking, two windows within the same company or within the same institutions. So I believe it is doable, but it requires maybe more discussions, more research for people to really understand and innovate more ways and tools to accommodate all these concerns. And I mean, when it comes to say Sharia-compliant, I mean, with Islamic, I mean, Islamic financing or Islamic philanthropy or Islamic funds, actually, it does not mean as I mean, for people not to misunderstand. It doesn't mean it is very like strict. I mean, in terms of usage, or there are some kind of requirements. Yes, I mean, need to be fulfilled. And once they are fulfilled, I think you can do a very good job. I mean, for example, Nama Foundation actually, I mean, is Sharia compliant. I mean, in terms of either our investment or even our donations. But I mean, being an Islamic organization does not mean also that you are only working with Muslims or working, I mean, in Islamic countries. We as I mean, for example, we do work also with all the beneficiaries. As I have just mentioned, I mean, how we identify, I mean, our beneficiaries. We identify, I mean, them based on the need, wherever the need, regardless of the background, culture, religion. That's why you find us working in Africa. You will find us working in Southeast Asia as well as Central Asia. I mean, in Kyrgyzstan. So I believe, I mean, categorizing the beneficiaries based on the faith or based on the background, that will limit and will put some kind of constraints, I mean, in front of the NGOs that are working on the field, and that actually will prevent the cooperation among the sectors, the Islamic capital, the Islamic-based capital, as well as non-Islamic-based capital. Because normally, when you go, I mean, with collaborations, you have to be more generic rather than, you know, more specific to a certain group of beneficiaries.
Thank you, Dr. Saleh. I think that's right, and it comes to a question. It kind of leads on to a question which somebody else has posed around Western jurisdictions and their ability to accommodate Sharia-compliant structures. I mean, just if I can comment on that for a minute or so. There are a number of jurisdictions which have enacted legislation to encourage Islamic finance. If I can give a quick example, a number of European jurisdictions have introduced the avoidance of double taxation when it comes to ijara structures which incorporate the underlying asset as real estate, because most jurisdictions have some form of stamp duty when there's a movement of real estate interests from one part to the other. As people who are familiar with Islamic finance will know, in an ijara structure, the asset moves from the financier during the term of ijara and typically moves back to the borrower at the end of the financing. That in itself creates frictional costs at the beginning and at the end, which really shouldn't be there because it's structured as a financing. So those jurisdictions have enabled Sharia-compliant transactions to be put in place in a manner that does not prejudice them when compared to conventional financing. I think moving on, again, you know, I suppose a question for perhaps Mr. Fadl, who's at the kind of structuring end of this. Are there any digital innovations in the field of Islamic finance for impact, including philanthropy?
I think in Indonesia currently most of the Islamic beneficiary currently has already developed some kind of like a financial digital platform into the public. For instance, like if there's any person who want to go to zakat, they can just log into the platform, the application, and then do the payment system on online digital banking and everything. So I think currently Indonesian market has already developed on that, and most of the beneficiary like the zakat institutional and everything has already developed that kind of platform. And as myself, as this is for the last Eid that I have for the zakat fitrah, I actually, as we cannot go outside to doing the transaction on the field, so we can do the zakat contribution, the zakat fitrah contribution based on the platform. I think based on that, that is the reason why we in Principal Indonesia is also developing some kind of like application and mobile apps to develop, so that we can gather some kind of like a compelling economic, Islamic economic ecosystem within our community.
Dr. Khalid, one for you, I think. How easy, if you can give practical experience or practical advice around how easy it is to use those funds in tradition.
I didn't hear the question, Imran, you were breaking a lot.
Sorry, Mr. Khalid, how easy is it from a practical perspective for non-Sharia compliant NGOs to be able to tap the zakat funds, which is predominantly used in Muslim countries?
That's a very good question, actually. I do not suggest that an organization, an NGO, that is not Sharia compliant and that knows that it will not be Sharia compliant for any reason, to try to tap into zakat in particular. Zakat is the most restrictive tool in Islamic finance. It is an act between a Muslim and his creator. And you, as an organization, if you come in between, you have to make sure that you are not really spoiling this relationship. That's one thing. Second, zakat is not the only tool in Islamic finance that an organization can tap into. There are several other tools like awqaf, for example, like sadaqah, like qard hasan. There are many other tools that can be utilized by organizations who are not Sharia compliant or 100% Sharia compliant. So my personal view, an organization, whether an NGO or any other entity that is not Sharia compliant, should not try to do zakat, because it will not work and it will affect the credibility of the sector as a whole, in my view.
Mr. Khalid, I suppose the question is not really so much non-compliant. The question, they may be neutral, if you like. They may not be expressly Islamic. So they may be engaging in activities which are not prohibited in Islam, but at the same time they're not explicitly endorsed by an Islamic organization. I mean, perhaps Dr. Sal, you might want to comment on that?
I believe, I mean, cooperation, I mean, or let's say non-Muslim or non-Islamic NGOs can tap into, into like Islamic financing or Islamic funds in case there are some kind of arrangement. And this actually Nama Foundation has conducted, certain number of projects whereby we had partnerships between Muslim organizations, as well as non-Muslim, let's say faith-based and non-faith-based organizations, and it was successful, by the way. But we have taken into considerations, the type of the project. I believe the type of the project, the type of the interventions that the both NGOs agree on is very, very, very important. identify or to, for both NGOs to decide whether to work together or not, whether the other NGO has access to the fund of the other NGO or not. But it is for zakat, of course, as Mr. Khalid has mentioned, it is quite sensitive, quite specific. But when it comes to the Islamic capital in general, I believe there is more flexibility for Sharia-compliant organizations to tap into Islamic capital, as long as they fulfill some kind of criteria that ensure the project will run in a very let's say Sharia-compliant manner, or let's say at least Islamic manner. And sometimes most of the projects actually are not necessarily not clearly mentioned to be at the project level. It is not necessarily to be Sharia-compliant project or non-Sharia-compliant project, right? But as financing, it is. So if these two NGOs are agreeing on the foundation or on the principles how to finance the project and how the project will go, how the project management or how the project life cycle will move on. If they agree on those points from the beginning, I think the rest will be smoothly implemented.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we've now run out of time. It's been a thoroughly interesting discussion and lots to think about, lots to absorb. If I can just remind everybody, please, to input their questions to the poll that's been set up by AVPN. That would be I'd be very grateful. It's been really interesting. We've learned a lot about zakat in particular. We touched on the other structures around sadaqah, awqaf and sukuk, the vast sums available for zakat, hitting at least several $100 billion globally. And we've got different ways of being able to distribute that amount. I'd like to personally thank the speakers, Dr. Saleh, Mr. Fadl, and Mr. Khalid, for taking their valuable time to contribute to this discussion. And I'd like to thank all the participants for engaging actively, posting questions, and really getting involved. It's been an interesting experience for me, and as it has been for, I'm sure, everybody else. And so without further ado, I'd hand over to Uti to take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for Mr. Imran for the fantastic moderation and for all of our speakers. This was an incredibly insightful session. I must admit personally that I belong to the people at the start of the session who had very little knowledge, and I have learned tremendously from all of you. I also want to give a special thank you for all of you for trying your best to address so many of the audience questions. We had an overflowing amount of audience questions coming in, both from Adobe Connect and Zoom participants, and I know that the speakers did their best to address as many as they could. For the rest that we were not able to respond, but they were excellent questions, we will share them with the speakers after this session so that they can still consider how they might want to respond to those as well. So with that, we have now come to the end of Islamic Capital for Impact, Pathway to Achieving SDGs in Asia. This session has been made possible with the kind support of our lead partners, Chandler Foundation, Stockholm Environment Institute, and Idan Prize Foundation. To continue chatting with your speakers and fellow delegates in this session, please make full use of the AVPN connector. You find the link in the resource section. I would also like to recommend that you go to the agenda page on the conference website to see who logged on to this session, and you can connect with them on the AVPN connector to continue the conversation. Do share your highlights of the session on social media, and remember to tag us using the hashtag AVPN2020. And up next, the session on scaling excellence in education is starting right at this minute. So please feel free to join us in that session as well. Thank you everyone, and please enjoy the rest of the conference.